Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wasalam ala rasulillahi wa ba'd. So, after having heard about some of the modern manifestations of Jahiliyyah and how in reality misguidance, if we look at it, if we think about it, misguidance, it basically doesn't change that much. You know, certain things change over time, but the types of misguidances, the types of traps and plots of the shaytan, they don't really change that much. They're very adaptable to time and place. And one of the blessings of Islam, one of the blessings that we have as Muslims, is that Islam makes everything clear for us. Every type of misguidance has been made clear. We can find ayat in the Quran and ahadith describing them for us. The evil forces are made clear to us. How to protect ourselves from these things is made very clear. So there's really nothing left in the dark. And now, in the Quran, in very vivid detail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about an incident that will occur on the Day of Judgment. If what we heard about was the plots of the shaitan in the dunya, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't just leave us at that. He goes as far as telling us exactly what will happen with the shaitan and his followers on the Day of Judgment. And there's an incident known as khutbah to shaytan. The khutbah, the sermon that the shaitan will give to his followers on the Day of Judgment. When will this happen? After the verdicts have been issued, after everybody knows where they're headed, the people of Jannah have been given their verdict of Jannah, the people of the fire have been given their verdict, and now they're anticipating, now they're looking at entering it. And Jahannam has been brought forward. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمْ. On the day when Jahannam will be brought forward, its gates are opened. And I mean, what can really make us visualize or understand what that scene would look like? There is really nothing we can say that could make us imagine what it's going to look like, what it would feel like when Jahannam is brought forward. But it might be enough what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to Umar. He said to Umar about this incident, about the moments when Jahannam is brought forward on the Day of Judgment. He said, مَا مِن مَلَكٍ مُقَرَّبٍ وَلَا نَبِيٍّ مُرْسَلٍ إِلَّا خَرَّ لِرُكْبَتَيْهِ. He said, at that time when Jahannam is brought forward, there will not be an angel that's close to Allah, or a messenger that was sent by Allah, except that they will go down to their knees. Imagine, Jahannam has been brought forward. The messengers of Allah will go down to their knees, and even the malaika, subhanallah. This coincides with the words of Allah when He says, وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ. You will see every nation, every people, every human will go down to their knees at that moment. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, حَتَّى إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلَ اللَّهِ لَيَقُولْ رَبِّ نَفْسِي نَفْسِي. Ibrahim, the close friend of Allah, the father of monotheism, recognized by all religions, one of the best of mankind, one of the most accomplished human beings to walk the face of the earth, will be saying, what when Jahannam is brought forward? Rabbi nafsi nafsi. Oh my Lord, what is going to become of me? What is going to become of me at this moment? And the Prophet ﷺ continued to Umar, حَتَّى لَوْ كَانَ لَكَ عَمَلُ سَبْعِينَ نَبِيًّا إِلَىٰ عَمَلِكَ لَظَنَنْتَ أَنْ لَا تَنْجُو. If you came at that time, when Jahannam is brought forward, and you had done the actions of 70 of the prophets, had you done the good deeds of 70 of the prophets next to your own deeds, you would think at that moment that you're not going to be saved from the punishment. Subhanallah. What kind of moment is that when Jahannam is brought forward? So you see these people now, they're turning and they're starting to blame each other. It was your fault. You're the one that misled me. I followed you. You were my leader. You were the one saying such and such. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, قَالَ الضُّعَفَاء لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَكْبَرُوا إِنَّا كُنَّا لَكُمْ تَبَعًا فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُغْنُونَ عَنَّا مِنْ عَذَابِ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. The weak ones, or the masses, the majority of the people, most of mankind will say to the leaders, to the influential people, لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَكْبَرُوا, those that had arrogance, to the influential ones, and they could be entertainers, they might be the billionaires, they might be the CEOs, the authorities, the leaders. They will say to those people, إِنَّا كُنَّا لَكُمْ تَبَعًا, we were following you. So are you now going to save us from some or all of the punishment of Allah? We used to look up to you basically. We learned from you. And then the influential will turn back to them and they will say, لَوْ هَدَانَ اللَّهُ لَهَدَيْنَاكُمْ. Had Allah guided us, had we been guided back then, we would have guided you as well. Basically, don't blame us. Don't look to us. It's not our fault. You made your own decision. So the blame game begins. And they start arguing and debating with one another, as Allah shows us in the Quran. Then all of a sudden they start making dua against each other. رَبَّنَا هَؤُلَاءِ أَضَلُّونَا فَهَؤُلَاءِ أَضَلُّونَا فَآتِهِمْ عَذَابًا ضِعْفًا مِنَ النَّارِ. Oh Allah, they're the ones that misguided us. So give them multiple times the punishment of the fire. قَالَ لِكُلٍّ ضِعْفٍ. Then Allah will say, for all of you the punishment is going to be multiplied. Don't worry, the punishment will be multiplied for all of you. Imagine this argument going back and forth at the gates of Jahannam. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, while they're arguing with each other, who comes forward? The shaytan himself. And according to some of the narrations, a pulpit will be brought for him. A minbar will be brought for the shaytan to address all of them. The influential and the weak. The leaders and the followers. The shaytan will address all of them. وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانِ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. He will say then, when he gets up on his minbar, the first thing he will say is, two promises were given to you. Allah gave you the promise of truth. وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ. Allah gave you the promise of truth. The Quran was there. The guidance was clear. Is there any ambiguity about what Allah wants from us? Do we not know? Isn't it clear? Isn't the message of Allah clear? Are there any two Muslims that differ that the Quran is the words of Allah? None of us differ. So what is asked of us is very, very clear. We all know what we're supposed to be doing. So he will say to them, Allah gave you the promise of truth, and I gave you a promise. وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. And I gave you a promise. What was the promise of the shaitan? The shaitan came and he promised freedom. He promised everlasting life. As he said to Adam and Hawa, شَجَرَةُ الْخُلْدِ. Here's everlasting life, just eat from the tree. And now he has people convinced again the same way. You can be young forever. Plastic surgery, Botox, just inject some toxins into your face. It will paralyze the muscles in your face and you will look young again. You can live young for the rest of your life. Good times, nightlife, mata'ul ghurur. And if you don't follow me, if you don't follow my way, then I promise you the opposite of that will happen. You'll live in poverty for the rest of your life. This is the promise of the shaitan. الشَّيْطَانُ يَعِدُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ. The shaitan makes you fear poverty. He strikes the fear of poverty into your heart. We've all felt that before. You felt that fear. What am I going to do? Where is the money going to come from? Now ask yourself, where did that fear of poverty lead you? Where did that fear come from? That was part of the plan of the shaitan. That was part of the plot of the shaitan against you. So while he's giving his khutbah, وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. I gave you promises and I deceived you. I betrayed you. وَمَا كَانَ لِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. Here's a very important part right here. Part of his khutbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us what the shaitan is going to say. This is part of his khutbah. He says, the truth is that I had no power over you. All I could actually do was call you. All I could do was call you. And then it was up to you whether you obey me or you disobey me, whether you follow me or you don't follow me. Now what does the shaytan do? In reality, what is the only thing that the shaytan is able to do? What does the shaytan do? What do we know about the shaytan? What does he do? He whispers. What is the shaytan called in the surah that we all know? Al-Waswas al-Khannas. He's Al-Waswas, the whisperer, Al-Khannas. What is the meaning of Khannas? The one that evades, retreats, runs away. He whispers and then he runs away. He keeps coming back. What is he trying to do? He's trying to plant ideas into your head. He's trying to plant certain ideas into your heart and into your head. But that's all he can do. All he has the power to do is to whisper. That's why Allah says, إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. The plot of the shaitan is actually what? It's weak. It's very weak. All he can do is whisper. It's something similar to what we see in commercials, in marketing, in advertising. What are they doing? They give you a sales pitch. They give you a slogan. And if you hear it enough times, what's going to happen? What happens? Where's the business majors? What happens if you hear it enough times? It's going to, you're going to believe it. You're going to accept it. Nike, what's the slogan? Everybody knows, just do it. If you wear Nike, you're going to be able to do it better and better. It's going to make you better if you wear it. So you believe that those are the best. Those are the best pairs of shoes. Wheaties, what's the slogan? Nobody knows, too old, too many years ago. The breakfast of champions. So subconsciously you feel like what? It's healthier. It's better for you. How many people actually look at the ingredients to tell if it's any different than any other cereal? Not that many people. But you assume, if you hear the message over and over and over and over, you assume that it's the best. If you were to pass it in the aisle at the store, you're going to assume that that's the healthiest cereal because of the slogan that you've heard so many times, right? So it's the same thing with the shaitan. He comes back and forth and he's trying to sell you an idea, but in the end, it's up to you. You're the one that makes the decision, whether you follow him, whether you accept his ideas, or you reject it. The problem is that what? If we don't understand this, then we don't really know that it's the shaitan whispering to us. We don't know that. We think that they're our own ideas. So that's why he says, دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. All I did was call you, but then you answered my call. In another verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about that the shaitan promises Allah, ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. I will come to them, oh Allah, I promise you, I will come to them from in front of them, and from behind them, and from their rights and from their lefts. You're going to find the misguidance of the shaitan all around you. Now notice, he says, I will come from directly in front of them. Where do we find the misguidance most of the time? It's right in front of our face, until it blinds us. It's on the device that's right in front of our face. The misguidance comes at you right in front of your face. And if you're not careful, if you don't watch out, it will blind you. You will be misguided. And one of the biggest plots of the shaitan is what? He uses what? That physical attraction. As Yusuf mentioned, that physical attraction. Trying to make people follow that impulse. All the way to the immorality. And this is one of the most important plots of the shaitan. Why? Because it leads to the destruction of the individual. It leads to the destruction of the family. It leads to the breaking down of the society. As we see clearly in the society that we live in. What is the rate of children born out of wedlock? Whatever it is, it's much higher than it was 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. What is the rate of children that's raised by one parent or neither of their parents? Much higher than it used to be. Broken homes, a lot more than it used to be. This is one of the most important plots of the shaitan, that physical attraction. That's what leads to most of these problems. The shaitan wants you to do what? Just follow the desire without thinking about the consequence. Don't stop to think about what will happen later. Just follow the desire right now. So he brings the misguidance in front of your face and he tries to blind you with it. And in younger people, that effect is even more powerful. That emotional connection is even more powerful. In the how many times have we heard about? It leads the youth to what? To even leaving Islam altogether. Because of a relationship, he left Islam. The girl ran away from home. She ran away from her family, ran away from home. Why? Because of a relationship, because of a guy. So that effect can be very strong. We have to understand that. We have to protect our homes from it. We can't just let the shaitan enter from every door, from every window, bringing that misguidance inside of our homes. And we're not doing anything about it until it's too late. We have to be very careful. So the shaitan continues, فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. So don't blame me now, again, because all I did was call you, then you followed me. So don't blame me now, blame yourselves. And that's when the real catastrophe that they're in, the disaster that they're in, starts to set in at that time. It starts to set in. And people will start calling out, right there at the gates of Jahannam. They'll start calling out to their own destruction. فَسَوْفَ يَدْعُو ثُبُورًا. A person will be yelling, I'm destroyed. I've destroyed myself. يَا حَسْرَةَ عَلَى مَا فَرَّتْ. Woe to me in what I fell short in. What did I do? What have I done to myself? They'll be calling out in destruction. Then the shaitan continues, مَا أَنَا بِمُصْرِخِكُمْ وَمَا أَنْتُمْ بِمُصْرِخِي. And at this point, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do for you, and there's nothing that you can do for me. I'm cutting my ties off from you now. I'm done with you. And that will be the end. They'll realize that they followed him into disaster. Now very briefly, practically, what can we leave a talk like this with? A subject like this with? What can we leave? What can we leave with practically? Very briefly, inshallah. First of all, when the shaitan made that promise to Allah, that he will misguide all of mankind to the best of his abilities, he made one exception. What was the exception that he made? Except for قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. He said, I will misguide all of them except for one group, the chosen group of your worshippers. And what is the biggest trait that these people have? They have ikhlas. These are the people of ikhlas. These are the ones that the shaitan himself admitted that he's not going to be able to affect and influence. So we have to look to what? Inside of our hearts. The ibadah of the heart. Not just the apparent ibadah. Not just what it looks like on the outside. Not just the image that we portray to other people. But the ibadah of the heart. The intention of the heart. This is very important. This is where we protect ourselves. And we have many examples of this. One of the best of examples is that when we look back, we see that the people of Ikhlas, they had hidden deeds. Hidden ibadat that they performed. Ibadat that they didn't want anybody to see them doing. This is the greatest sign of Ikhlas. Some of them would wait until everybody in the house was sleeping to wake up and pray Qiyam al-Layl. They didn't want their own spouse to know. They would wait until to make sure that the spouse was asleep, then they would get up to pray Qiyam al-Layl. This is Ikhlas. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he used to go out in the morning before Fajr. And he was known to go into old widows' homes and clean them and prepare the food. And he would leave before anybody saw him, to the extent that those old people that he was entering their homes to help them, to prepare the food, to clean the home, after years, they didn't know who it was that was coming. Subhanallah. Can you imagine the level of ikhlas that he had? wanting for the deed to be done purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, some of them would fast, and they were known to carry food with them in public. So nobody would even think, nobody would get the idea that they might be fasting. So this is one of the greatest ways you can guarantee or increase ikhlas, is by having hidden deeds that you do for the sake of Allah that nobody knows about whatsoever. Secondly, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. The people of taqwa, when they're touched by the impulse from the shaitan, you know that impulse. You know that whisper when it comes. You know that impulse to follow the desire. When they're touched with the impulse of the shaitan, تَذَكَّرُوا. They remember. They remember what? Either they remember Allah, or they remember that this is the impulse coming from the shaitan. تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. And at that moment of remembrance, they go back to having insight. They go back to having wisdom. They go back to having the understanding of the believer. So remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often. And that's why we find so many examples from the sunnah. When you leave your house, do what? What dua do we make? Bismillah, tawakkaltu ala Allah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The Prophet Muhammad said, if you say the dua when you're leaving your home, one shaitan says to another shaitan, كَيْفَ لَكَ بِرَجُلٍ قَدْ هُدِيَ وَكُفِيَ وَوُقِيَ. One shaitan will say to another, what can we do with this person who has been guided, and he has been sufficed, and he has been protected? The shayateen admit, there's no way to misguide this person. He's been guided, he's been sufficed, and he's been protected by Allah. Why? Simply because he remembers Allah when he leaves the home. So that remembrance of Allah has to be there all the time. This is the protection from the shaitan. Making sure that prayer is established in the home, especially the sunan, all the time. لا تجعلوا بيوتكم قبورا. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't let your houses become spiritual graveyards. Make sure that the salah is established all the time, that you're teaching the family, that you're teaching the children, that you're dragging them to salah with you. Have patience. It's not enough for you to lose patience. Go pray by yourself real quickly. Oh, I don't have time for this right now. I'm going to call each one of them and wait for them to make wudu and then try to line them up, and they're going to be jumping on their heads while I'm trying to do that. Forget it. I'm just going to pray by myself. No. You have to have patience with that. You're training them from a young age is their protection when they grow up. That's how they will remain ubad later on in life. Have patience. It's just a few moments of patience that you have to have with them. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is getting rid of, now alhamdulillah that we've become worshippers and we've become people of the masajid and we're religious people, the shaitan doesn't give up on us. Now he's coming to us to try to destroy what? That ikhlas. He's trying to come and plant riya in your heart. Make sure that the deed looks good to everybody. Make sure that you hold that image up in front of the community, that everybody only sees good. And you start doing everything with that intention. What does the salah look like when you're alone, and what does it look like when you're with people? Ask yourself. When we're alone, we're rushing it. We're yawning. How are we yawning in salah? How can we be yawning when we're standing in front of Allah if we have ikhlas? If we understand that we're standing in front of Allah. We probably wouldn't yawn if we were standing in front of a cashier at the store. You wouldn't yawn. Out of manners with any human being, you wouldn't yawn in front of them while you're talking to them. But in front of Allah, why? There's a lack of ikhlas here. There's a lack of understanding what we're doing, having khashya of Allah, recognizing the feeling, the meaning of standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to analyze ourselves, reflect upon what do our deeds look like when we're alone compared to what the deeds look like when we're in public. Don't let the deeds be ruined with riya. So we'll stop with this inshaAllah, having mentioned a few practical tips inshaAllah, and open the floor for questions or comments for a few minutes because we've already delayed the salah quite a bit. تفضل. No. So the brother mentions one of the ayat in the Quran that the Quran subhanahu wa ta'ala said, but this is a different verse in the Quran. The verse that I mentioned is قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. And another verse he said لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. So this is one verse and that's another verse. Jazakallah khair. This is another important verse when the shaitan says, I will sit at the sirat in front of them. So he's going to try to block the sirat. When you try to direct yourself towards Allah, understand that the shaitan is going to come and he's going to block you from that sirat. He's going to make a hurdle that you have to jump over. Now, Jazakallah khair. One second, inshallah. Go ahead.
So the question about ruqya, so again, it's halal for you to perform ruqya, to read Quran, and somebody, the Prophet Muhammad, as he was in his last days of life, Aisha would perform ruqya on him, recite Quran on him. But the question is, if you're asking somebody, these ones who have that VIP status, they don't go asking other people for it. If someone comes and offers it, it's allowed to accept it. But they don't go asking other people because their reliance on Allah is so strong. I don't need anybody. I have Allah only. I can turn to Allah myself. I can read the Quran myself. I don't need your recitation. I have my own.
There is a question in the back. Tafadhal.
Perhaps a person, he's been tricked by the shaytan many times, to the point where that sin that he may commit is a habit, it's a lifestyle now. What kind of advice would you give to a person like that?
So the question is, perhaps a person falls into a sin to the point that it becomes a habit. When the sin becomes habitual and it goes on for a long period of time, what is the advice for this person to try to leave that sin? First of all, the beginning obviously is recognizing the sin. Recognizing that this is a mistake. Understanding and having that regret, because as we know, the first condition of tawbah, of turning back to Allah, is having regret. So the person has to have that recognition that this is something wrong and I want to change it. From that point, we have to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that tawbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises, as the Prophet Muhammad said, that tawbah wipes away everything that comes before it. So nobody should despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Making tawbah to Allah will wipe away everything that came before it, no matter what it was, no matter what the magnitude of the sin is. Tawbah will wipe it all away. All it takes is a moment of truthfulness with Allah and it can all be wiped away. So nobody should have despair in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now practically, then there's a lot of tips and strategies for staying away from the sins and recognizing the trigger points, what leads me to the sin, whatever environment leads me to the sin, the places, the people, whatever it is, then I have to try to avoid those places. I shouldn't put myself back in the same environment where I keep falling into mistakes, around the same people that I keep falling into the same problems with. So we have to take practical steps at that time, and even if we fall back into the sin again and again and again, simply keep turning back to Allah. Some of the scholars said, as long as you're upon tawbah, as long as you're upon turning back to Allah, then you're in good shape. Then the heart is healthy. Then the door is open, as long as you keep turning back to Allah. Some of the scholars said, if you want to measure your iman, it's not always measured by how many mistakes you make. It's measured by how quickly you turn back to Allah after making a mistake. So never despair. No matter how many times you commit the sin, no matter how many times you fall into the same trap, and there's many narrations about this. The Prophet ﷺ mentioning that even if the person were to make the same mistake or the same sin 70 times in one day, they would be forgiven by Allah. As long as that sincere tawbah is there. Meaning that when you're making tawbah, you really have regret. And you really have the intention not to go back to it. And you turn to Allah with that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you to overcome it. But just don't give up and keep turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. Allah. Hamza.
What if you're really sick and you can't read Quran yourself? Would it be okay if you could ask someone else?
Yeah, again, so with the ruqya, if you're really sick and unable to, it's fine to have somebody perform ruqya on you if you're unable to, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did when he was passing away and laying in the lap of Aisha, and he had his wife Aisha read Quran and using the swag and make dua for him. That's fine and allowed. But it's a matter of where your heart is attached. Is your heart attached to Allah, or to the raqi, or to the one performing the ruqya, or to the imam, make dua for me? Where is your heart attached? Let's take one question from the sister side.
No questions.
No questions.
I have a question for you. You were mentioning about the living and things like that, and then you said, Prophet Muhammad says that if they're going to fast from 9, next year they're going to fast from 10, as Christian, they wave their hands and stuff like that, and Muslims should shake hands. But what I see over here, what is about that? If we cannot go towards falling out. So if we shake hands, but what is this, the fist bump business? What is that? Is that something, is that something like, I see in the masjid also. That's fist bump. What is the fist bump? Well, if we can do fist bump, why can't I go trick-or-treating then?
Maybe we should serve the sweets now, brother.
I've never heard that qiyas before. Yeah, the point is that, we definitely should be trying to be proud of our identity from A to Z. From the way that we dress, from the way that we look, from our appearance, from the way that we eat, the way that we greet. He said they don't pray with their shoes on, pray with their shoes on. They don't pray with their socks on, pray with their socks on. They're going to worship on the 10th, add the 9th as well. It was about, that they were not dyeing their hair, you dye your hair. So when Islam was established in Medina, one of the focal points of the da'wah was make sure the Muslims have their own identity. We're not going to take and steal and bar to the point some scholar, Sheikh Al-Emaan, he said, we should oppose everyone. Even, to some extremes, he said, if they're, when they write in their books and they write a line under the word, we should write the line over the word. To that level. He said, we should have everything that we do be unique to the Muslims. We should not raise our families wanting to be like or taking or adopting any ways of the non-Muslims in any way, shape, or form after Islam is strong. So that goes to that even with the handshakes. We had our own greeting. We were taught our Islamic greeting, what we should do, what we should not do. Don't bow, don't kiss, shake the hands, hug if you want. So we were given very specific outlines on how to greet, and we should try our best to follow that. But for someone to say something small like, I saw someone bump fist, so now they'll celebrate. That would be an extreme, obviously. The celebration of the Halloween, this is now going back to Aqeedah. This is going back to creed and theology. This has basis in Satanism and the worship of the devils, and this clearly goes against everything that we're taught of staying away from the evil, of being on true tawheed, of raising our families on Islam and avoiding anything that will weaken that. Whereas some other things, maybe people argue in our day and time now, they are not unique to kufr anymore. They're not the way that kuffar greet anymore. This is the way the whole world greets now. So there's a little bit of difference there. Is what we're talking about specific to non-Muslims, or is it the way of the whole world now?
Maybe it could just also be added to that there would be no harm in it as long as it also should not take the place of the Islamic greeting or the Sunnah, right? So there'd be no harm in bumping fists or saying "What's up, brother?" But if we said "What's up, brother?" in place of "Assalamu alaikum," then this becomes a problem, no doubt about that. So it should definitely not take the place of everything that is part of the Islamic identity. No. Question.
You mentioned that you should try to raise your children to have a unique identity, try not to have them fall to whatever other people do. And I totally understand that, but in the West, if you yourself were raised here and inshallah if you try to raise your children here, how would you be and you're trying your best. But if they're out, they see kids trick-or-treating or they see kids doing this, they would want to do it themselves. So how do you instill, them not wanting to do that and love Islam and want to, not?
Very good question. So how do you develop that identity more or less as a Muslim? So this is a lifelong approach. This is a lifelong practice in order to establish that Muslim identity. This is something that we have to continually work on all the time. Now, it's important to understand that Islam is applicable to every time and place, right? We believe that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran as the last message to mankind, and there will be no other revelation after it until the Day of Judgment. Therefore, it has to be applicable to every time and place from that point until the Day of Judgment. So there is flexibility within Islam, no doubt about that. There is flexibility, and that's why you can always find, unique aspects of every culture. If you go to this country or that country or whatever Muslim country, you're going to find people still have their own culture. They still have their own practices that they enjoy, but they're able to do it within the boundaries and the confines and the rules and the guidelines of Islam. So that's one point. There are things that, as long as they don't contradict with Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah, then they're acceptable if they're part of the culture. But if it's something that has to do with religion and it has to do with faith and belief, then here we have to stop and say, no, I'm not going to take part in this ritual because the ritual has a basis in religion, has a basis in belief. Now, as far as how do we raise our kids upon that, this is something that has to start, of course, from a very young age. So we can't, obviously, our kids can't be exposed to every aspect of the culture. And we see now, especially, more so than in previous times, that look at all of the norms in the society. How many of the norms of society do we find to be repulsive? Do we find to be things that are absolutely unacceptable, that have become norms? Whether it be with the relationship or the changing of the genders or this or that. SubhanAllah, I was just reading yesterday, one couple got divorced. The mother decided she wanted to change the gender of the child, 7 years old. She decided she wanted his gender to be a female. She goes to a therapist or a psychologist. They mention a few things. He tried a dress on a few times. And so they start the process of changing the gender. Okay, now the father tries to oppose that. He goes to court. In opposition of that, he loses the case in court. So here you have a father that's watching his 7-year-old son going through a gender change, being, turned into a woman, subhanallah, and he can't do anything about it, right? So this is the society that we live in. So obviously we can't just have our children exposed to every part of the society and say, for example, that, it's part of the society that we live in, so it's okay. No, we have to draw our guidelines and our boundaries very, very clearly and make sure that we take an approach to teach our kids from a young age what they believe and to make sure that belief is planted firmly in their hearts so that they're able to recognize right from wrong.
And another thing to add to that as well is that making sure that we give Islam and the Islamic holidays and our rituals, our deen, the sunnah, it's do right. Usually you find that when there's families and children growing and that confusion and that weak identity and that shying away at a certain age, middle school, high school, not wanting to identify anymore, not wanting to be a Muslim, not wanting for the friends to think I'm a Muslim. A lot of times it goes back to having that weak identity from the young age. Is Eid given its due right? Is the family celebrating Eid? Is Eid seen to be our holiday of the year twice a year? Or is it we're going to go pray now and then I'm going to go back to work? Are our holidays when we're traveling, are we traveling to Muslim countries? Are we traveling to make Hajj and Umrah? Or are we going to Hawaii and the Bahamas and here and there? What is our lifestyle like? What are we exposing them to? Are we allowing the kids to go and to mix and interact in the schools? I was driving here right now, a school right next to my home. They had a big RV outside, and the RV was a DJ. It's an elementary school to high school. The RV was a DJ, and they're playing music, and there's people dancing outside, and some people will think it's okay. I'm sending my kid to school. What's the big deal? My kid's going to school. He has non-Muslim friends. They go and they celebrate. They do these activities. So we can't wait until one day, high school, middle school, after college, now the kid has a weak identity. Now the child wants nothing to do with Islam, and they want to trick or treat, and they want to celebrate every festival and every holiday. It's got to start. Imam Malik has the famous, a man came to Imam Malik with a daughter, and the daughter was how old? 2 or 3 years old. So the man came to Imam Malik saying, I'm coming here to get some advice on my daughter. How to raise the daughter, how to make her a strong believer, how to... So the Imam said, what, you're coming to me now? You should have come to me years ago. So the man saying, my daughter is 2 or 3 years old. You should have come to me and already had your plan before the daughter was even born. But you're coming to me now, you still don't know what to do now. Your daughter's already here, already 3 years old. So how about the person who waits until their children are in high school? And then suddenly they want to bring the child to the Imam. My son doesn't want to pray anymore. My son, has doubts about Islam. So it's about instilling those things at a young age, making that part of their life, part of their identity, before they get to that point. Well, Allah.
Just another question. I recently went to an MSA shop, and the topic of holidays came up, and somebody asked about Halloween, and he said no because of the pagan background. But then somebody asked about Thanksgiving, and I don't celebrate it myself, but he did. He said it was his personal opinion, but he basically said it was okay. He really said, "Go buy yourself a turkey." He said that it's okay because he said that he doesn't know if there's any religious standing, because the person who had asked the question said that okay, fine for Halloween, I understand the background, but for some holidays where it may not have a religious standing, maybe Thanksgiving or Valentine's Day or something like that, they don't have a religious standing. They're saying that is it okay to still do it, just because of fun? So I didn't really agree with what he said, but how do you go about telling people or just answering that?
So it goes back to kind of what we were talking about when we talk about that identity. From, he said he gave his personal opinion, go buy a turkey. I would say don't buy a turkey. The word Eid, it comes from the Arabic word Ada Ya'udu, and that's what I follow. A Eid is anything that comes, regularly. A day that comes every 6 months or annually, some day that's celebrated, that's called a Eid. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad said what? لا تتخذوا قبري عيدا. Don't take